Okay, so this part of the video is all of the stuff that you need to do a full reglue or sole swap. I have a link to a Amazon store where I curated a bunch of this stuff, so you can go check that out and pick and choose whatever you want. I'm just gonna go over some of it here. Also making this a separate video. So anyway, I'm just gonna use my phone and point to stuff and talk about it. Is that cool? All right, homie. The only problem is the audio. There, what do you think of that angle? First of all, 5mm nitrile gloves. Safety is a thing, but also you don't want to be putting your hands in used sneakers. I don't. I need to wrap it up, if you know what I'm saying. Do not use those for acetone though. It will just rip right through them. Hook tool. This is one hook tool. This is my favorite hook tool. You don't just buy one, you buy a set, and they're very cheap. But these things are so handy. I don't know how often I use this, but not just for pulling the threads out of cup soles, but also for cleaning off the bottoms of the shoes when you really got to get in there. These things are great. X-Acto knife and blades. Now you always want to switch out a new blade whenever you are slicing off glue. Erasable pen. It's the only one that I love. Frixion erasable. It comes in a pack of 3 and it's 3 different colors, and I definitely recommend that because it depends on the color of the shoe, what color is actually going to show up. Essential when you need to mark off the top of any outsole in order to show you where your glue line is for when you're using your rotary tool. Nylon brush. I only have one here, but I linked to the Rejuvenator set of 3. That is the best thing that Rejuvenator has, basically, is the brushes. Don't bother with their soaps. All you need is Castile soap. I prove it here in this video on the top right. Cotton rounds. I prefer cotton rounds over cotton balls because it seems to be more surface area. It seems to be sturdier than cotton balls. It doesn't break apart like they do. Sometimes the cotton balls will break apart and you have all these tiny little pieces of cotton all over the shoe that you have to clean off now. And also these hold a lot of acetone. I mean, I actually have to put acetone on the front and then I flip around and put some in the back and it absorbs all of it. These things are quality. I don't use cotton balls anymore because of them. Oh wait, no, acetone. All right, acetone. The acetone has to be 100% acetone. It cannot be nail polish remover. It's not gonna work. Gotta be 100%. Squeeze bottle. I use squeeze bottle for any solvent. This is where my acetone is in and I have it marked out. This is where my glue is in. I have that one marked out. Storage is a little bit easier, but also everything is cleaner and neater, and cleaner and neater means safer. You're not spilling anything because you're taking it out with this huge brush that's in there or whatever. And here's a little tip. In order to keep the air out, I just use a little pin. This is a little pin from sewing. I just put a little pin in there. Covers up the whole hole, provides a decent seal so that it doesn't dry up in here. Safety glasses, an absolute must, especially when you are using the rotary tool. Don't skimp out on stuff like this. Respirator, also a must in my opinion. You're gonna be using solvents, especially the adhesion promoter, which I'm pointing to right here. Even if you're outside, the spray can go towards you, so I highly recommend using a respirator. I use this when I'm using the adhesion promoter, and also I use it when I am using the rotary tool just to protect my lungs because it is all these tiny little particles that are coming off. And then I keep referencing the rotary tool. This is an old rotary tool. I think that this is discontinued now from Harbor Freight, but I linked to one that had some really good reviews and it's not expensive on the Amazon store. It's got like 6,000 reviews and 3,000 purchases in the last month, so I think it's probably pretty good. And then there is the drum sander. It's coarse. It doesn't specify what grit it is, but whatever it is, it's fine for what we need. 3-inch masking tape. There's the masking tape right there. This is what I use to tape off the upper before I apply the adhesion promoter and glue. Adhesion promoter. There's a few different brands. A Bulldog or something like that is the one that I see most people use, but that one's expensive. Rust-Oleum is cheaper and it's the same thing. So I just go with whatever's cheaper. If you happen to have an O'Reilly's in your town, O'Reilly's actually has one that's like a little cheaper. Less than $1 or something. Basically the same stuff. So that one's good too, but I have a link to this one in that shop. Barge Infinity. I've been messing around with all kinds of different glues, deciding which one I liked best. I think it's definitely the Barge Infinity cement. The reason why I go with Infinity over Super Stick is because this is toluene free, so there's no VOC, so it doesn't have like this really strong smell and gives give you a terrible headache. That's why I love this. I store it like this, but the part that I need, I pour into my squeeze bottle. Glue applicator. I couldn't find one in the shop this shape. I kind of like this shape for cup soles. These silicone glue applicators are awesome because you just peel the glue off. They're not messy. They help keep everything clean and they applicate the glue very well. Definitely recommend a silicone glue applicator. Heat gun. Now, the reason why I like a heat gun over just a blow dryer, you don't need a ton of heat to reactivate the barge. The thing is I like to have a controlled setting so that it's always the same every time I do it. So the controlled setting, I can be a lot more accurate because this has a dial in the back that I can actually adjust the temperatures. Infrared thermometer. Now, this is not the infrared thermometer that I have linked. I don't even know if they make this one anymore. And also, I got this from an old job and I may or may not have stolen it. But you remember that snitches get stitches, right? In order to have that controlled setting, in order to reach your perfect temperature for your glue, I believe that this is essential, especially for the first few. Once you start getting the hang of it, maybe not. You certainly don't want to make your glue too hot or not hot enough. But typically most of us will make it too hot and it'll start doing what's called webbing. And webbing is bad. We don't want webbing because then they won't stick together and it's a mess. Okay, so this really helps. Bone folder. Bone folder here is great for helping apply pressure on the side of the outsole when you're bonding, but also it helps separate when it's a little bit tough to separate. It has this point here, but it's also smooth. So it just kind of like breaks the glue apart when you're going in between the outsole and the upper without causing any damage. So this is great. Glue eraser. These things are amazing. Once you're done gluing, typically you're gonna find glue on the outsole, on the upper, whatever. You just rub this on the glue and it'll roll it off without making any damage to anything else. Also, if you ever buy like a dunk and it has glue stains on it, instead of going on Reddit and complaining about the glue stains, you can just use this to remove them. Stitching awl. You don't have to jump right into my handy dandy $300 hand crank sewing machine. Stitching awl will do the job. This is basically the standard one here, and I have a link to this exact one in that store. The stitching awl comes with, my finger's in the way, I'm doing the dad thing, okay. The stitching awl comes with waxed white thread. If you want a different color, you're just gonna have to order it. The factories, like Nike, they don't use wax thread because they're not hand stitching. They use bonded nylon. That's what that thread is right there. This is just for picture's sake, okay? This is size 207. It's actually not the size that they use for the out stitch, but you can absolutely use this for the back stitch. It actually makes it easier for the back stitch if it's a little bit thinner than the front stitch. I have a link in the description for the right size, which is 277. That's the collection of colors that I have that are closest to me when I'm sewing. They're all bonded nylon, UV resistant, very strong, weather resistant. Definitely what they use to stitch your outsoles together. And then contact cement. I always have like a little tiny bottle of this contact cement. This is literally just to glue the thread ends that are inside of the shoe. You want like 6 inches or so laying down in there. That way in the future, you know where the ends are and it's gonna go right under the outsole. To make it nice and clean, I use the contact cement and brush it on. It's not necessary, okay? But this is what the factory does, so this is what I like to do too. Boy, I'm really screwing that angle up, aren't I? Where were you? I don't even know where you were. Were you here? Was I here? Yeah, sure, whatever. Link in the description below for that Amazon store I was talking about. They just let me curate a bunch of stuff, so I picked out all this stuff and good prices. I tried not to find anything that was like stupid expensive for no reason. If you're gonna purchase any of this stuff, it would really help the channel if you would do it through that store, so I can get cash money for my drug habit. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you're watching the full length feature, it's gonna start right now. Today we're going to go over how to do a reglue on a cupsole shoe. That means a Dunk or a Jordan 1. Our example today is Nike SB Dunk Low Skate or Die from 2008, but any shoe with a cupsole and stitches is going to be the same process. Step 1. Remove the thread, remove the outsole, remove the foam interiors. Leave the wedge air unit alone. Find the thread ends on the inside of the shoe and trace them to the outside. You should be able to use a hook tool like the one I'm using, and that should be the only tool that you need for this step. Just pull the thread ends with your hook tool to the outside of the cupsole and then give a tug on one of them until you reveal the backstitch loop underneath, and then just unhook it from there, and then do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again. If you find that the thread end is getting too long or starting to get frayed, don't be afraid to cut it. Just make sure you leave enough that you can still tug it. Once you're done with the front stitch, you have the satisfying reward of going inside the shoe and pulling out the back stitch, which should give you no resistance at all. Now, since this shoe required a reglue, chances are all of the glue is old enough that you should be able to pull the parts apart. If you can't, then I would recommend putting the pair in the oven at 170 degrees Fahrenheit and checking every 5 minutes if you can pull them apart or not. Regular Dunks and older SBs have a full-length piece of foam on the interior of the outsole. More modern SBs have a half-length piece of Phylon with a logo you can see on the outside of the shoe. Jordan 1 outsoles have an encapsulated wedge air unit that goes to the heel. Best to leave this alone as you risk popping it. Step 2, do it again for the other shoe. Step 3. Use a brand new X-Acto blade and carefully slice off the old glue. The sharper and cleaner your X-Acto blade is, the cleaner and easier your work will be. Slice off the old glue, being careful not to slice into the upper. This step is long and tedious, but it is also one of the most important steps in order to get a great bond. If you find yourself applying a lot of pressure to the blade, switch to a new blade again. This isn't just for clean work, but also for safety. The more pressure you're applying, the higher the chance that you slice your paws, dog. Step 4, do it again. For the second shoe, I used a shoe last. It provides a firm background for your cuts. You don't need to use a shoe last. You can use a shoe tree, or you can use nothing at all. As long as you're careful, it doesn't really matter. Step 5, using an erasable pen, mark out the top of the outsole. If there was foam inside the outsole, make sure it's in there and place it on the upper exactly where you want it to be. Using an erasable pen, mark out the top of the outsole around the perimeter of the shoe. Step 6, do it again for the other shoe. Step 7, remove the old glue from the outsoles. Brush out any debris from the inside of the outsoles. Apply acetone from your squeeze bottle onto the cotton round and clean out all of the old glue from the inside of both outsoles. Step 8, using a rotary tool, sand below your pen mark. Wearing safety glasses and a respirator and using a surgeon's precision, use your rotary tool and sand down the entire perimeter of the shoe below your pen mark. Careful to avoid breaking the stitches that hold the stroble in place, but if it happens, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. Step 9. Tape off your upper above your glue line. Using masking tape, tape around the perimeter of the shoe. The bottom edge of the masking tape should go right over your pen mark. This is going to protect the upper from step 10. Step 10. Stay with me now. This one sounds way harder than it actually is. Apply adhesion promoter to the outsoles and the upper 3 times, 10 minutes apart, and then apply glue within 10 minutes of the last application of adhesion promoter. Wear your respirator, grab your adhesion promoter. Bring the project to a well-ventilated area, and then shake the can of adhesion promoter for 60 seconds. Concentrating on the inner walls, spray the inside of the outsole. Concentrating below your masking tape, spray the perimeter of the uppers. Set a timer for 10 minutes. When the timer is up, spray a second application, and then set a 10-minute timer again. Third time, third coat. Make sure your gloves are on because you're going to apply glue within 10 minutes of this last coat. These are the instructions on the can. This adhesion promoter product is for auto paint, and they want you to apply the top coat of the auto paint within 10 minutes of your last coat of adhesion promoter. Our top coat is the glue. Apply glue to a section with the squeeze bottle. Using a glue applicator, even the glue out nice and neat. Remember, you're on the clock, but pressure makes diamonds. 10 minutes is plenty of time to get glue around the perimeter of both uppers and inside both outsoles. Leave no empty spots. If using barge, do a second coat after the first coat is dry. When it comes to this kind of bonding cement, there's a thing called dry time and a thing called open time. Dry time is what it sounds like. It's how long it takes for it to get fully dry. And open time is the time you have to bond the two things together before you would have to reactivate the cement. We ignore the open time because we have to bond one section at a time, and it takes time. I highly recommend Barge Infinity. It's just like Barge Super Stick, except it's toluene free, so there's no VOCs. It's less of a headache. With this stuff, the dry time is 2 to 5 minutes, and the open time is 5 to 10 minutes. So give it a full 15 minutes before you do your second coat. And then after you do your second coat, give it a full 15 minutes before you do anything else. If your pair has a foam interior, while you're waiting for the upper and outsole to dry, now is a good time to apply glue. Apply glue on one side and let it rest on the non-glue side, and then once the glue side is dry, then turn it over and apply glue on the non-glue side so that both sides are glued. Step 11. Remove the masking tape, reactivate the glue with heat, and bond one section at a time. Bonding is clearly the critical process in this whole thing. Where many of us have made mistakes is the temperature that we use to reactivate the cement. If the cement is not connecting at all, it's not hot enough, and if you get webbing or it starts to separate, then it's too hot. On the Infinity directions it says, if open time is exceeded, cement may be heat activated at 110 to 130 degrees using hairdryer, heat gun, or heat lamp. So that's your window, 110 to 130 degrees. For the rest of the world, that's 43 to 54 degrees Celsius. This just came in the mail. This is the Super Stick, and it says the same thing, 110 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. So put it on the bottom. Bam, right there. I don't love using this. I have this as a backup because this is not toluene free. It has a very strong chemical smell and it gives me a major headache, and you have to be in a well-ventilated area. Now, if you're doing adhesion promoter, you already need the well-ventilated area anyway, so it's not like a crime to use this, but I just rather not. Most restorers do though. No Flippin' Kicks does. And your mom, she restores sneakers. I don't know if you knew that, but she does. Ambient temperature will play a part, so everyone's going to be different. I keep my workshop a little bit cold, so I usually have to get the heat gun a little bit hotter. My goal is to get it to the temperature I want within 10 seconds. This is where the infrared thermometer becomes very handy. Apply the heat at a section of the glue, and then measure it. Don't do both at the same time because you will get a false result. All you want is between 110 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Once you're within that window on both sections you're trying to bond, it's time to bond. Remove the masking tape around the upper. I keep my heat gun on during this whole process. As long as it's somewhere safe where you're not going to start a fire, it helps to have a consistent temperature the whole time instead of stopping and starting and stopping and starting. Heat the interior of the outsole, and if you have foam, the underside of the foam. On Jordan 1s, be very careful in applying heat on that wedge air unit. Press the foam and outsole together, and now we're ready for the upper. Get the heel of the upper and the heel of the outsole to temperature. Line up your glue perfectly and press the inside of the shoe to the outsole using your fingers, a shoe last, or a bone folder like I'm using here. Move on to the front toe area of both pieces, separated here for demonstration. Line up your glue perfectly and press. So in review, the back heel first and press, and then I go to the front and press, and then I work my way to the middle on both sides. From the front to the middle on this side, and then from the front to the middle on this side. Anytime there's any kind of slack or anything, it can be absorbed in the middle there. Spooky ass light. It can be absorbed in the middle there without messing with the shape. All right, come here, Casper. Once everything's bonded, if you see any glue on the outside, just use your glue eraser to remove it very easily. This thing is a wonder. Never complain about glue stains from Nike again. All you need is this. Wepa. The final step 12, stitching. Check the chapters below for hand stitching or hand crank machine stitching. Hand stitching. Hey, what's up, dog? We're gonna learn how to hand stitch using a sewing awl. Threading, just like a machine, has two threads. It has a front stitch and a back stitch. Today, our front stitch is gonna be orange, our back stitch is gonna be blue. They are opposite colors. That way, hopefully, you can see them easier on screen. So we're gonna start with our back stitch first. Step 1, get almost the entire back stitch thread inside the cup sole. Now, when you are working, you will only have access to inside of the shoe right here. When I demonstrate this, I'm going to take that access in mind. So you're going to take your bonded nylon thread or your waxed thread, whichever you prefer, thread it into the needle eye, and then pull it down to the length, about the length of the stitching awl, and then hold this short side with your thumb. Now you're going to go ahead into a factory hole in the heel. Go ahead and pokey poke. Okay, so the stitching awl is in there, but I only have access to right here. It might be dark if it's, a high ankle. One thing I always do is I pull it out halfway and you see it created a little loop. That way my hands are in here and I can kind of feel. Now what I want to do for the back stitch on this first one is I want the long end of this thread to be inside of the cup outsole and that 6 inches or so to be sticking out of the back. Okay, so when I'm in here, I can't see it, but I can feel. I'm gonna pull on one side and I'm gonna say, oh, okay, that's where my thumb is holding down the thread. That's the short side. That's not the side I want. So then I'll go to the other side and I'll start pulling. And I'm gonna get the entire length into the cup outsole. And now I have to pull it out of the eye here, the entire length once again. Now I'm going to hold on to the thread on the inside when I pull my stitching awl out. That way, no funny business over here. And this is what it should look like inside your cup outsole. You have the entirety of the thread in here with just about 6 inches or so sticking out. Now we're ready for our front stitch. The front stitch is the thread that people can see. So typically if you're doing a sole swap, reglue, whatever, it's the color that matters. The back stitch color does not matter. We're gonna go ahead and thread the needle through the eye again. About the length of the stitching awl on one side and the rest of it on the other side. Holding it with my thumb again, I'm going to stick into the next factory hole from what I did the back stitch. So I'm sticking it in, then I'm pulling it out halfway just so I have that loop so I can feel. Now this time for the front stitch, I want the short end inside the cup sole. So I'm going to do my little tugging here. Okay, I tugged this side. As I'm feeling it, I can see that that was the long side. That's not the side that I want. So I'm going to tug here. I know that's the short side where my thumb is. I'm going to let go of my thumb and I'm going to go ahead and pull the short end of the thread inside. Now I'm going to hold it here while I pull the stitching all out. Boop! Okay, that's what it should look like here. Now the next step, give yourself a little bit of slack on one side, little loop just like that. And then go ahead and poke it into the next factory hole. Pull halfway, you have your little loop again. You're going to pull on that short side. The short side now is going to be your first actual stitch. I'll try to show you here on this camera. I'm pulling on the short side. You're going to see that familiar stitch form there. Okay, now I have this loop here. Try to remember this or else it'll get kind of tangled up. I'm going counterclockwise, so I always want my loop on this side of my needle eye. That way when I pull it out, I'm not pulling the loop with it. I'm just pulling the rest of the thread. So I have my loop on this side of the needle, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull the back stitch through it. The whole entire back stitch. Just pull it through. Once it's pulled, I'm going to pull my stitching awl and then pull the thread to tighten it up. There's the back stitch, and it is keeping the front stitch from leaving that hole. That is my first thread that you can see, that your customer, you, whoever can see. Now I'm going to make the next one. Make sure that I have a little bit of slack on this side of my needle since I'm going counterclockwise. I'm going to go ahead, stick it into the next factory hole. I'm going to pull it out about halfway. I'm going to feel for the side, the short side, and I'm going to pull it taut. And as you can see on this camera here, I'm making the next thread that you can see. The loop is on this side of my needle. I'm going to pull the back stitch through. I'm going to hold on to that loop and pull out the stitching awl. Then I'm going to tighten it, and now I have 2 threads. And this is it. Over and over and over. So I'm just going to start doing this until we get to the difficult part here. Loop on this side. Poke, pull halfway. Tighten. We got our third stitch here. Pull the back stitch through. Hold my loop, pull the stitching awl. Tighten the thread. Boom. One thing I should mention when you're doing this, do not pull too hard. If you pull too hard, the back stitch will pop out of the front. You can see on this camera, you can see the blue there. You don't want to see the blue, your customers don't want to see the blue. Just make sure you pull it back through so it's nice and even. Give yourself a pull on both sides so there's an even tension between both. Basically what a sewing machine does, it tries to provide even tension to make this thread possible. Loop on this side. Factory hole. Pull halfway. Pull short side taut. Pull back stitch through loop. Hold on to loop, pull out stitching awl. Pull thread taut. Slack on this side. Poke through factory hole. Pull out halfway. Pull taut. Pull short side taut. Pull back stitch through loop. Hold loop, pull stitching all out, and pull front stitch taut. Slack on this side. Poke through factory hole. Pull out halfway. Pull short side taut. Pull back stitch through loop. Hold on the loop, pull stitching awl. Pull thread taut. Leave slack on this side of needle. Poke through factory hole. Pull halfway. Pull short side taut. pull back stitch through loop. Hold loop, pull stitching awl, pull thread taut. Leave slack on this side of needle, poke through next factory hole. Pull halfway, pull short side taut. Pull back stitch through loop. Hold loop, pull stitching awl. Pull thread taut. Just want to show you what we've accomplished so far. Here on this camera you can see half of that heel is done. And on this camera you can see a nice straight line where the back stitch is doing its job. And then just keep doing this over and over and over. Slack on this side. Poke through factory hole. Pull halfway. Pull short side taut. Pull back stitch through loop. Hold loop, pull stitching awl. Pull thread taut. I'm going to keep going here. Okay, now probably for the most part you could see inside of the shoe when you took your hand out these threads here. But this starts to get to the point where you need to feel. This is why I like to start from the back. But once you start getting here, you're going to notice that you have to kind of look in this way to see if you can see the threads. So this is when your feel is basically going to be the whole shebang-a-bang. Now, don't be afraid to make big loops if you have to. That way you can feel for things. Pull halfway, pull taut. I gave myself a bigger loop on this side so that I have a bigger loop on the inside. That way I don't have to worry about looking for it. I know it's there. And then all I have to do is feel around for the back stitch. Once I feel the thread, I put it in both my fingers and then pull through. This is a very big loop, but I mean it's only big because we need it to be sometimes when we have bigger fingers, bigger hands. Hold on to your loop. Pull stitching all through, it's the same thing. Pull thread taut. So your hand's going to be in more like this. Give yourself a nice bigger loop. Poke through, pull that halfway. Get that bigger loop towards you. And by the way, it looks like I pulled my pass thread out a little bit. It's not a big deal. When I go pull for taut the next time, everything should line up. Pull back stitch through. See, once I have it and I'm in here, I'm just going to take my hand out of the shoe. And then typically, from now on, the back stitch is just going to be hanging outside of the shoe. Like this. Okay? I'm always going to be able to at least see it. Then I hold my loop, pull my stitching awl, and pull the thread taut. See that loop right there? As long as I'm pulling this nice and tight, I can go ahead and tighten that loop up and then tighten this loop up. No big deal. Always make sure that you're pulling your back stitch from underneath your loop. So right now, if I couldn't see this and I felt this here, I felt my back stitch, I might pull it, and then when I do everything, I'll pull this taut and it's just going to pop right out because it didn't hook onto anything, and I'll know, oh, I didn't actually pull the back stitch through. It must have been in another spot. And that looks like I skipped a hole. When I was doing that little demonstration, I just went right to the next hole.
Alright, well, no big deal. Make sure I pull my back stitch out so I can go back one. Once you start doing this enough, it's going to be more of a fluid motion. It's not going to be, you know, each step that I'm explaining. Loop, stick, pull short side taut. Pull back stitch through the loop, hold loop, pull stitching all, pull thread taut. It's going to be more and more natural the more you do it. It's going to get more and more challenging once you get to this front area because it's all encapsulated. Your hand is just going to be in there and it's all going to be feel. Even with the laces off and the tongue pulled this way, it's still going to be pitch dark in here. It's going to be all by feel. Okay, once we start getting into this toe area, since you're pulling these threads taut, just go ahead and hold that long end of the back stitch outside of the shoe and pull outside here. That way you don't have to worry about fishing around in there. Even though you're going to be a lot further away, no big deal. Not only does it get more challenging because you can't see up here, typically the stitches are closer together. So you actually have a little bit more work up here. When I cut the length for this thread, I just took a piece and brought it around like this, and then in here, and then I cut it. If we end up being short, it's not that big of a deal. Essentially what happens if you end up running out of one of these threads is you just have to do these first steps here all over again. You just have to do them in the spot where you left off. So let's say I ran out of backstitch here, I would have to put the rest of my new backstitch in this area, have a little bit hanging out here, and then continue. I think I may run out of this front stitch here, which is great because then I can show you what I mean about how to start again. Yeah, we're getting pretty short here on the front stitch. Now, since I'm going to be running out of this front stitch, what I like to do is leave enough thread so that I can glue it down back here on this side with all the other threads that I'm going to glue down at the end. And we're almost there. I'm going to do like maybe 3 or 4 more threads and then I'm going to call it a day on this piece. I'm about there. So the front stitch looks like I cut a little too short because it's not going to make its way all the way around. So what I will do with my last thread of this stitch, go as normal, put this end in here, pull short side taut, pull back stitch through loop, hold on to loop, pull out stitching awl, but then I'm just going to let it go. Stitching awl is going to get off of that thread there, and with this loop I'm just going to pull that end into the cup outsole all the way through. So it's nice and clean. Now here's that end here. When I glue down, all of the threads will be present there. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab another piece of thread. I'm going to grab a different color. That way you can kind of see how seamless this is going to look. You wouldn't be able to tell on the outside unless I grabbed a different color. So just for demonstration purposes, that's what I'll do. I'll grab this Volt green here. Hopefully it'll show up well on camera. When I'm pulling out my length, obviously maybe I wasn't thinking or I didn't pull out enough, but so top to bottom, 1, 2, 3, let's say 4. That's plenty. It's way more than I need probably, but just in case. Grab your snips. Okay. I have my new piece of thread. I'm going to do the same exact thing I did with the front stitch in this heel area, which if you remember, I put the short side inside and I kept the long side out. That's exactly what I'm going to do here. But this time I'm going to make sure that my short side is long enough to get to the back of the heel when I'm gluing down. So it's going to be about that long there. So I'm going to hold where I want it to go in, right about there. I'm going to put my thumb right over the stitching all here. Where this thread ended here, that's where I'm putting in my new thread. Thumb over the thread, stick it in the last hole that the orange one was in, pull halfway, and I'm going to find the short side. This is my short side here. And I'm going to pull the short side all the way through. There, that should be long enough to go to the heel here when I'm gluing down, and it is very nice. Now I'll hold on to it when I pull my stitching all out, and it's the same thing, baby. Slack on that side. Poke halfway. Now, the challenge here would be, because see all these threads here? How do I know which one is mine? Well, if I was leaving my back stitch on the outside of the shoe, I could just give it a tug as I'm feeling here. And I'll be like, okay, the tug. Okay, there it is. All right, I feel it now. And then I'll pull it through. Slack on my side, poke, pull halfway, pull taut, back stitch, do the loop, hold the loop, pull the stitching awl, then pull, thread, taut. See, it's as if I didn't run out of thread. It's the same thing. And from the outside, it's going to look exactly the same. Even when using machines, this can happen. You can't see the bobbin, which is the back thread, because the shoe is covering it. Once you run out, you don't know where you're going to be on that shoe, but it's going to be the same, pretty much the same thing, where you're going to have a cup outsole that's going to have like 3 or 4 threads in it versus 1 or 2. All that means is that a thread ran out and they had to start with a new one. I know some of you are watching this video cursing me out at this area right here, and I'm sorry. What I will say is I don't love it either, and that's why I bought the $300 hand crank sewing machine. It saves me so much time doing this. It's incredible. If you're watching this on the reglue video, it's going to be the next chapter. It's also a standalone video that you can see in the top right here. It's the best 300 and change I ever spent on my business of restoration. Purists don't like it. Purists like doing it like this, and that is totally fine. Me, I just want to be more productive, and being more productive means being faster, doing something that's very repetitive like this. You may notice that I'm doing some steps kind of out of step of what I had mentioned before. I might be pulling the stitching all out first and then pulling the back stitch through. Totally fine to do that. if it's easier for you. Once you get in a groove, it's going to be more like one motion. And I'm sure you've noticed by now, since I'm going counterclockwise, this loop here is always on my side, and this loop here is always on my side. If you want to go clockwise, that's fine. It might be easier for some. It might be easier for some left-handers. Just make sure that you have your loop going the right way. I'm going to demonstrate what happens if you don't, okay? Let's say I put my loop on this side, right? And I start trying to pull this out. I'm stuck. I'm stuck on my small thread there. Okay, because I pulled it off the wrong side. And basically being stuck on the small thread here, you wasted some time, you might get frustrated. So just try to avoid that by pulling your slack on the correct side of the needle. I'm going counterclockwise, so it's towards me. Not only purists, but some people just love doing this. It's something that they can do and chill, listen to music, watch TV, whatever. One of those kind of mundane tasks where it's just the same kind of thing over and over and over, but you are creating something. And creating something is what it's all about. Home stretch here, getting towards the end. Kind of cheating a little bit using this hand. I just don't want to make this video too long and painful for you. I think by now you got the idea, but you're probably wondering, how does it all end? Well, we're almost there and I can show you. But basically, you want all of those ends to be in the back there for nice clean work. Then you're going to want to cut your threads so they're all kind of uniform. You want to look like you took some pride in your work. Alright, are we there yet? A few more. I'm going to go into this hole where the end of my back stitch is, and then thread as normal, and then finish here in the very first hole that I did at the beginning of this little project. Alright, this is where I'm finishing. I'm finishing where I started. Very first stitch hole, factory stitch hole that I did. Poking through there. Pull halfway. Pull the short side taut. And then just pull the long side all the way through. Now you can pull your stitching all out. Should be clean. What you should have here is your start and finish of your front stitch, which typically would be the same color, but since we ran out of the front stitch we have two colors, but that's the beginning and the end. And then we have one end of our back stitch here. And the only thing we have to do to get that other end of the back stitch, you can try to use your fingers, or I like to use one of my hook tools. Link in the description below for the hook tools. Okay, so I take one of my trusty hook tools and I find the hole that the end of my back stitch is coming out of. I go on the inside and I just pull it through. Okay, so that's what it should look like. We have our in and out front stitch, and then our beginning and end of our back stitch. But since we actually ran out of the front stitch over on this side, we're gonna have two more ends over here. I wanna bring them over to the heel area. I like nice clean work, so this is why I do this. Essentially they're all together here, right? And I want them to be more or less the same length. I'm gonna go ahead, maybe I'll trim this one a little bit because I just want it to lay on the bed here, not lean on the heel. Okay, get rid of that. And then these four here, which is typically what you're gonna have, I like to lay them down like here, but I like to be able to see the end when I take out the insole That way the next time I need to thread, I know where they are. And then I'll just go ahead and cut them all the same length. Then when I'm ready to glue down underneath the insole, everything is nice and neat right here. Just one strip of cement glue, rubber cement glue, whatever, right down there, just to hold them down. And that's it. There's our back stitch line right there. Right about here, we ran out of front stitch, and then I started a new one. And then just to show you how seamless that is, I did make it 2 different colors just to demonstrate that it is 2 separate threads. If it was the same color, you would have never known. This is not anything that's atypical. You run out of thread when you're sewing. It happens. There's our start and end. Thank you for tuning in to Papi Chulo. Now get stitching. Get stitching. Peace.
Step 12, hand crank machine stitching. The $300 cobbler sewing machine is hands down the best investment I've made in my restoration business. Link in the description below to get yours. Here is a quick tutorial for sole swaps and reglues. Step 1, remove the presser foot. Since you're stitching into existing factory holes, the presser foot will only get in the way of your sight of the holes and the sewing action. Just use a straight blade screwdriver to remove both screws. Make sure to cup your hand underneath so you don't drop and lose them. Putting the screws back where they were minus the presser foot is a great way to keep them safe. Step 2, load your needle. Open the bobbin case from the flap on the bottom. Grab your round machine needle. Make sure the groove above the needle head is facing the machine. Press the needle up into the groove of the needle holder, slide up the tension screw, and tighten down the tension screw with the straight blade screwdriver. Step 3, adjust needle height. When you make a full rotation on the hand crank, you will notice that the needle plunges and then stays in place for a little bit. During this time, the needle head should be just above the base of the bobbin chassis. With the hand crank at the 6 o'clock position, loosen this set screw for the needle holding rod. Adjust the rod until the needle head is just above the base of the bobbin chassis. Then tighten down the set screw. Step 4, thread the needle. If your machine didn't come with a thread rod, I use a 3-inch 832 machine screw. Load your thread on the rod so that the thread is coming off counterclockwise. First thread through this hole on the arm. Then through the right hook on the tension disc, around the tension disc, and then the left hook on the tension disc, and make sure that you pull up. I find that threading the left-hand side of the second tension disc provides a better stitch. Thread up through this coil, inside and up through this circle, up and behind the main arm, front to back on this take-up lever, then with the small wire hook that should have come with your machine, push the hook up through the slot in your needle rod. Once the hook is visible, thread the hook, pull the hook down until you see your thread. And then finally, thread the needle from left to right. Step 5, load the bobbin. Open the bobbin casing with this tension flap. Remove the bobbin and the bobbin case with either a small tool or your fingers. The bobbin doesn't hold very much thicker thread, so I just hand wind thread onto it. On the bobbin case, there are 2 holes and a tension spring with a set screw on it. With the bobbin thread going counterclockwise, thread through the furthest hole from the set screw. Thread through the corresponding hole on the top. Tighten the thread behind the tension spring. Drop the bobbin right back into the casing. Rest the thread in the groove and then close the casing. And finally turn the hand wheel a full cycle and then use the top thread to pull the bottom thread out of the hole. Step 6, stitch that sneaker. Make sure the needle is in its highest position before you load your sneaker on there so you don't scratch your sneaker with the needle. Line up a factory hole and turn the hand crank a full cycle. Then line up and cycle and line up and cycle. And you just keep doing that at your own pace. Now for some troubleshooting tips. If you notice that there is a problem like loose stitching or the hand crank is too tight, you will probably need to adjust the tension on your tension discs, or maybe go fully around the second tension disc.
Remember, the thicker the thread, the more tension you need. You can also check if the tension spring on your bobbin is loose. And finally, check if your needle height is still in the proper position. The wrong tension could add some pressure to the needle that could send it off course. I believe that adding this machine to your restoration business will not only increase the quantity of what you can do, it will also increase the quality of what you can do and increase your bottom line. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to check out the links in the description if there was anything in this video that you found interesting and wanted to learn more about, and I'll see you on the next one. Once stitching is done, pull the thread ends in and then glue them down. A stress test at the end is you checking your own work. Apply pressure all around the perimeter of the shoe where the upper meets the outsole. If you have no separation, then you are good to go. Congrats.